Hey, I thought I'd finally show my face on camera, so ta-da! It's Felix Warren. I know, like everybody's been wondering, what do I look like? Well, here you go. I know it's a little bit strange, but I'm sure everyone will get used to it. And so, good to see you all. Yeah, okay. Even my cat can't keep quiet about that. So, hi everyone, it's Felix. I'm finally gonna start doing videos where I actually talk to you. So, let's start on with that, I guess. I wanted to do the first one. Come on. Mm-hmm. You get to be on camera too. Alright. Had to check off that box. So, I want to do the first one by reviewing the Idiosyncradeck and the Amethyst Oracle. And these are two excellent decks put out by Cracked Amethyst, aka Jessica Bott, and I suggest that you get them as soon as possible because they're not guaranteed to always be out there for you to buy. They're not like, you know, a deck that's put out by Llewellyn or by Lo Scarabeo. They are done by an independent artist who is not devoting her entire life to stocking inventory. So, get them while you can. And show some appreciation for the work that Cracked Amethyst has done on this because these are amazing decks. And also, they were obviously made by a magician, and you should not anger magicians. It's just the general rule of survival in this world. So, let's take a look at the Idiosyncratic Tarot. The defining feature of this deck is that it is simple and it does not use traditional imagery. It uses a lot of modern imagery and also imagery from nature. And this is actually very helpful because not only are the cards simple to read, but they challenge assumptions about how these cards are usually supposed to be presented. For instance, the Magician, everyone's used to the Rider-Waite-Smith depiction of it and the other depictions that show a classical magician at his table with all of his instruments. I'm using the he on purpose because it's almost always a guy. There's recent decks that flip that around, but it's usually like very typical 16th century magus. I guess they're trying to go 13th century. I'm not really sure. Actually, centuries. I'm really bad at the century thing, and I don't even know. Probably 1600s, 1300s is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, what I'm going to say is that I hate history, so with this deck, I don't have to worry about numbers, because the Magician is a clam, and has used its innate powers to form a pearl out of constant irritation, which is a really good commentary on magicians. So, the rest of the deck is much like this. We have the Empress, which has a lot of traditional imagery in it. We basically have the natural, the abundance, the garden, the provider tree that is, you know, nurturing. There's actually a little tiny bird nest in the crook of the tree right around there that brings in the maternity sort of parentage kind of role that the Empress often has, but without showing like literally a pregnant woman. There's eggs in the nest. That can mean many things. It's about fertility. Fertility of all sorts of ways. So that's done very well and taps into imagery that is really suitable for everyone. Then we have the Emperor. The Emperor is a mountain and just has this amazing visage to it of like being dominant over the entire landscape, like unshakable will, and just generally like not something you can really argue with. And a lot of times the Emperor is about like a dominant ruler who just has their will and is going to get their way. Like the entire power of the Emperor, and the Emperor is about power, so is the Empress. It's like, you know, I say it's going to be like this. You cannot argue with a mountain. You can try, but you're going to look silly. I'll probably see that sometime whenever I'm hiking. So, as you're seeing, the natural world is a huge element of this deck. We have the tower, which is a volcano now. The foundation is being shaken so that something new can be built on top of it, in this case, the actual earth, because that's what the lava will become. And there's a great calamity that's being caused in the upheaval. That's very indicative of the tower, and it's also completely unignorable. You cannot. You will notice that a volcano is erupting. Uh, the tower is not a subtle card. So, what do we get whenever we get to, say, the minor arcana? The suits have changed a bit, which is kind of common in decks these days. Wands are now arrows, pentacles are now stones. These are still very direct associations with the original suits, so I don't see any problems with trying to figure out, oh, what's this suit mean with this whenever they change it to this name and that name, because sometimes I get that problem with like a lot of decks that change their suits. But so we have the Eight of Arrows. The Eight of Arrows is usually, or the Eight of Wands is usually swiftness. Here we've got arrows on fire in the air. This actually makes more sense than the Rider-Waite-Smith card, because the Rider-Waite-Smith is 8 wands coming in from the top of the screen, like my hand, just out of freaking nowhere. Like, and maybe there's somebody off screen behind them that are all like kind of in the air waving them. Maybe they all got catapulted perfectly parallel somewhere. But here, like, we know how these got in the air. They're arrows, and they're on fire, which instills a sense of urgency. And so there's just a lot of sense to that. And I quite like how this theme plays out in the rest of the deck. For instance, the Eight of Swords. Traditionally, someone is actually tied to one of the swords that are all stuck in the ground, in the middle of nowhere, often blindfolded, and there's the obvious sense of getting stuck, but also that you kind of got yourself stuck. But there is kind of the question of, why are you out there tied to a sword? Is this some kind of like 70s fantasy movie and the Beastmaster is going to come and save you, or what? When does this happen to someone? Whereas sword is stuck in mud. That's just so clear. And it's kind of obvious, that got there maybe by accident, maybe by foolishness, but the problem is clear. And psychologically, it still has that conflict of, what do we do now? But also that urgency of, hey, you got to get your sword out. Just stop messing around. And then we have somewhat modern imagery that really, I'd say, helps tie these cards' meanings to something more current than Renaissance-based imagery, whatever century we're saying that they are. The Nine of Cups. It's often the wish card. It's a really nice offer, sometimes too good to be true, and this is like, look at this, as we were like in a tropical beach area with a cup filled with something delicious with whipped cream and chocolate chips on top. Definitely someone's wish is being granted. One could ask, like, is this a bit over the top? What is going on? What is the catch? But overall, it just, like, that's something that appeals to us right now. Well, the Rider-Waite-Smith of, the merchant sort of standing there with his arms crossed and, like, with presenting the cups. Like, there's 9 cups, sure, and like, there's, we could come get our cups. It's like, why do we want these cups so bad? Well, I know why I want this cup so bad, because it's in white. So, and that's just pretty much the theme of this deck is, oh, suddenly this card makes more sense. So we have the Ten of Wands, or the Ten of Arrows in this one. And the Ten of Wands is actually a pretty sense-making card in the Rider-Waite-Smith, but this one, to show the overburdenedness, we have the tree branch here that is starting to splinter because of the weight of this full quiver of arrows. We also have the accomplishment, the sense of accomplishment of having a full quiver of arrows, but the urgency here is, hey, you need to start, actually grabbing those arrows and using them now that you've actually attained the task of collecting them. It's time to move on, because usually when you get to a 10, yes, you finish something, but it's also like, what's the next step? It's time to move on. So, this deck has an interesting card that sort of caps it on the end. It's an extra card, Magic, and that ties into the Amethyst Oracle. One quick thing I do want to note is the court cards, they do not depict people. Instead, we have this is the page of arrows. Notice that it is dawn and the arrow is just sort of sprouting. Then we have the Knight of Arrows. We're in full day, and it's got some, imagery there that kind of gives it more personality. It started actually forming itself. Then we have the Queen of Arrows, giving it some... Actually, the magic is still added here, because we have these 5-point flowers, and stars I always associate with magic. But as you notice, it's twilight. It is a liminal time. We've got the passage of time here. And then we have the King of Arrows, with our fire in the background. It is full night. So with the court cards, I notice that the progression of time is really centered on, as well as the personality of the card. And court cards are usually supposed to be some sort of progression, from initiate to master or whatever. I like that this is really shown in the court cards here in a very clear way. So, moving on to the Amethyst Oracle. The Amethyst Oracle came out after the Idiosyncradeck, and it is purple on the back instead of green. So the cards are the same size, and of course similar design, so you can interplay them if you want, but it's going to be easy to tell them apart. That means you can't directly mix them together into one big deck without knowing that one's going to be the Oracle and one's going to be the Tarot, but you're probably not going to know what card it is just from looking at the back anyway. So, the Oracle is different than most Oracles I can run across because it tackles a lot of subject area that I don't usually see. For instance, there are some typical cards, such as we're going to have the 4 elements, this one being air, and there's always going to be a symbol at the top, this one being the symbol for air, traditionally. That's straightforward. And then, of course, we get the seasons, this one being autumn. But then we get deeper cards that are not always touched off on in Oracle decks, such as Labyrinth. Here we have the question mark, the mystery. That's great. But what else do we have? Well, we have masks. Specifically, we have lies. This is not just saying masks on the card, it literally reads lies. And I find this is very important because this deck actually talks about things that we consider negative. Lies can be used for useful things, but they're lies. They're falsehoods. This isn't just saying glamours, it's not just saying masks, it's not just saying even deception, it's saying outright lies. And it's great to have a deck that actually talks about this, because there are so many things that happen in our lives that are not good. And I need a deck that talks to me about those things. I need it to tell me about, there are people out there who lie to me. There are people out there who lie to other people. And I like that this deck actually talks about that and addresses it, as opposed to having, positivity, manifestation, light, miracles, illumination, imagination, healing, make a wish. I'm tired of Doreen Virtue's decks. She's got a million of them. I have actually one. Everyone has their secret shame. But, and I think that there is a place in the world for Doreen Virtue-like Oracle decks, but I'm tired of seeing every Oracle deck out there be so overly positive. There's a place for that, but I really need a deck that talks about real stuff. I also need a deck that talks about chai. There's a symbol of a tea bag at the top. Chai is very important. It's an element of my life. It's a foundation of the world. And this is the deck that delivers on the chai card. We also have a lava lamp. So, this isn't just serious stuff. There's also bittersweet stuff. We've got the nostalgia card. And the nostalgia card, I mean, these little tokens are everywhere. You go to souvenir shops, you go into Claire's accessories, and they're it's like, that little bond that you have with someone else, but you might give this to someone, give this to your best friend when you're 8 and then like never see them again after you're 10. But you might have that little necklace still around and you've got nostalgia that connects to that. But it's like a connection from the past that may never actually be joined again. So, but it also could be nostalgia for like the best friend that you made and you still have. So that can really go both ways. It's a bittersweet card. Then there's cards that really smack you in the face, like Omen. Um, and this is exactly how omens should be. Omens just go boom. They don't do subtle. Um, and we've got room in the deck for that. And of course, there's a magic card. I like that there's a magic card in both decks because it links both of them together. Um, and they're both a little bit different. I showed you the other one earlier, and I've got it here now. So we've got two magic cards here. And one's like a little bit simple, one's a bit more complex. But they really tie the two decks together. I think of this as a magician's deck, both of these decks. I kind of think of this as one deck, parts 1 and 2. And there's a magic card in each. That's kind of a big blatant hint. There's also a science card in the Oracle, which I find really notable. That so much of the world is being talked about in this deck, and not just magic. Not just spiritual, but also, let's talk about science. There are so many great cards in this deck. I could just keep going on. But I'm going to wrap this up. This deck is really useful for magic, both of them. I would suggest right off the bat trying the tarot deck to describe the situation you have, and then the oracle deck to apply magic to the situation. You can also use the tarot deck to read on a situation and get information about it, and then use the oracle deck to do magic regarding the situation. And the reason that I'm emphasizing that this is good for magic is because I do magic, so this is useful for me. Also, I just really both of these decks come across as very much magician's decks. That's what it's focusing on and centering, and it's really refreshing to have that because, well, quite frankly, I do magic, and I do magic with tarot and other cards, and so decks that actually welcome that and say, hey, it says magic right here on the tin, um, that's nice. It's useful. I don't have to go out of my way. So I find that both of these decks are really suitable for a lot of uses. They're very useful, they're very clear, they give just like sometimes people call decks like this blunt or sassy. A deck is not being sassy if it gives you the answer to the question you asked it. It's not being blunt either. Literally, if you do a one card draw, it can't do anything else. It only has so many words. There's nothing else it can do. Like, don't ask a deck to be a person because it's not. It's a deck of cards. So blunt is good. Sassy is a word people should stop using so much unless they want to like use other words besides sassy when they really just mean, oh, you told me something I didn't want to hear and you maybe said it in a sarcastic way. It's like, it's a deck of cards. Just chill. Move on. So I find that these decks are perfect. Get them now, because I don't know how long Cracked Amethyst is going to keep selling them. And when they go away, then you're going to have to pay like $200 on eBay or something if you really want one after the case. So just get it now. Go. Do it. Cracked Amethyst is not a big-time publisher. She is an independent person doing these decks on her own time while she has her other stuff to do and just making the art that she wants to make in the world. So don't expect her to just keep her store open forever and keep these decks out forever for you to buy. Just jump on it now. The end. And so yeah, that's it. Jump on these decks. Now that you've got a look at them, and now that I've said they're so cool, I'm not expecting that everybody will get them, but I'm expecting that some of you out there are going to be like, hey, maybe I want to get this before they're all gone. So if you're thinking that, go do it. All right. Good night.